What do you do when you're told that added salt is physically dangerous for you? For Chris Lauer, the answer was to innovate. He founded Hacking Salt to prove that a life saving diet does not have to be a bland one. Today, his wife, Mary Lauer, is carrying that torch forward. Mary is pouring new energy into the Hacking Salt community and website, not just to help thousands of people navigate low sodium living, but to honor Chris's incredible legacy. Join me as Mary shares her story of transition, honoring a mission, and how she's helping the world hack salt one meal at a time. Hey, Mary, welcome to Midwest Meets Mediterranean.
Hey Laura, good morning. How's your day going?
It's going really well. And I'm so excited for this interview. Truth be told, this is our second attempt. We won't discuss what happened to the first recording. It's a company secret, but we're getting better with technology. Trial by fire. So today we are, of course, going to be talking about hacking salt, but I want to start with you and your background.
Sure.
I know you as a PR professional and media guidance counselor, largely to me and many
Right.
others, photographer, certainly,
hmm
storyteller today. Tell us about your beginning and what started you on your career path.
Absolutely. My father was my inspiration because he did public relations, sports information at a small college in Dubuque, Iowa, where we were all raised. And so I loved seeing him getting that camera and taking a picture of a sports team and then writing a press release. And then it just seemed like his personality was so, as an extrovert, was so born on this job was just made for him. And my mother is very much more structured, much more checklist, as are my brother and sister. But I just did not fall too far from the my father's personality and strength. So when I saw you could make a living out of actually enjoying talking and things like that, I went into college with a speech communications major and English minor, and thought, hey, we could try some video production. I could try some PR. It was wide open. So that's how it started.
And
What's
where was
interesting,
college?
Dubuque, Iowa, Loris
It was
College.
okay.
hmm hmm
So you got to live at home and go to college.
No, well, yes,
No?
I got to live in home. One of the biggest fallbacks was we all wanted to live in the dorms just to see what the dorm
Mm-hmm.
living was like. So I was a track athlete, and so we almost ran indoor and outdoor track the full year round, or the full school year basically, if you were doing well and going to nationals and things like that. So it was really much more convenient to live in the dorms. So all 4 years I lived in the dorms, came home Sunday nights, did laundry, got a good meal, and then trekked back to the campus.
Okay. And the program there was great for you.
They had just started really getting into video production, and they had a multi-million-dollar studio that was state of the art back in the late 80s. And what was really fun is the day I graduated, Mother's Day of '88, there was this little movie that now the kids may or may not have heard of it, but Field of Dreams was being filmed about an hour away or half an hour away, depending on where the set was. But I was taken on as a production assistant for that movie.
Are
There
you
was only
kidding?
two local people, two local college students that became PAs, and so I did everything from I was a stand-in for the PTA scene. I got to be on top of rooftops and do little fog wizards to make some animation. It was just a riot.
So that was
And
Kevin Costner, Susan Sarandon,
nope, that was Bull Durham,
Bull
but
Durham.
it
Okay, I'm
was
mixing them up.
Burt Lancaster, James Earl. Yeah,
Okay, okay. So that was based on someone that is from my hometown.
yeah.
Yes, Chisholm, Minnesota. And
Yes,
my grandmother knew him. I can't
Rick,
think of his name. Doc
Doc Moonlight or Moon.
Graham.
hmm
Yes. So isn't that funny? And
Small world.
the town was so stylized and pretty, and Chisholm is not quite that stylized and pretty, but we
Right.
were very, very proud of that. So what a great connection. You and I have so many. Keep going. Keep going.
Sure. So I worked at the little ABC affiliate as well. So the KDB TV, I worked on the production side. So I was turning the microphones on. I was running the camera in the studio. I was, writing the graphics of all the scores and everything. So I was doing all of this at 22 years old. and just really had a passion for storytelling through the visual. So I always, had a decent camera. I'd taken photography classes in high school, and then my dad hired me to be a photographer for the intramural program and for other things. So it was just always so easy to visually tell a story. So when it came to getting my first real job, I moved to Chicago and talked to a lot of different agencies, thinking that I couldn't get in with video production facilities because it was just so, you really seemed to like, you had to know someone. It was a very small community, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't, I was coming out of Dubuque, Iowa. So I got on after a year of searching and everything in Chicago with a investor relations agency. Now, I didn't know the first thing about stocks and IPOs.
I
They,
won't
they
ask any more
handed me a
questions.
balance sheet during the interview, and they said, "Can you read this?" And I
Oh
looked at it, and
no.
it was in English, and I said, "Well, yes, I can. That's a four. That, I mean, like, can you understand this?" Is what they should have asked. So it was
Right.
their own darn fault, right? So what I ended up having to do is start, at the very bottom and spin of the dial phone with a plugboard switchboard. It was just really old school agency on the top of
Wow.
the old Playboy building overlooking North Avenue Beach, which wasn't bad. But it was truly okay. Here's a list of 100 brokers. The retail brokers, kind of like the used car salesman of financial services, field, and invite them out because there's a new IPO and we want people to buy in for the as it goes public. And so I had to really develop a tough skin to invite people out. And then once they came out, I had to do a follow up, and I had to use the typewriter because uh, computers were just for the secretaries. So we had to teach the secretaries how to use the Apple computers. But I digress. Because I had no fear, I didn't know who Goldman Sachs was. I didn't know who Payne Weber. I had no fear of talking to all of these really big league, very institutional, very important, mostly men. And so I would just crack jokes, or I would tell stories, or I just, found ways to get in through assistants that then built their ways into like senior analyst positions. And, I took it from just talking to retail brokers into a many different fields because I just loved getting on the phone. And I love because, here's the story, here's the prospectus, here's the facts and figures, but the story you tell the broker is different than the trader, different than the analyst. I love that about this job. And that's kind of what I've carried over to Sterling Cross, the PR firm that I founded in 2003, is that a story's like a diamond. You hold it up to the light, and it can be, well, this is a women owned, company, or this is a St. Paul based company, or this is a luxury chocolate company. And you just, you have to find the right publication or the right TV segment and give that producer, that director, that reporter the angle that's going to most compel them to take action and write a story, do a report.
So, in essence, what you're saying is that storytelling is a type of sales.
Absolutely, it is.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Hmm.
I love that. And I love how it informed you to what you're doing today.
Yeah.
How did you wind up coming to Minneapolis? I love
Hmm.
Chicago.
Well, I did 5 years in Chicago, and then one of my clients was this laser systems company that it's kind of the same thing. It was late on a Friday afternoon, and I got someone from Fidelity, a small cap fund manager, and he's like, "Mary Coyle." He's well, that my maiden name is Coyle, and he's like, "You've got to be Irish." He's like, "St. Patrick's Day is coming." I mean, he just went off on this whole different, little gambit, and I said, "Well, I'm calling to set up a meeting with you, and because you're going to love this laser company." And he's like, "Oh, well, if you say so." It was just like the most ridiculous thing that he would take the meeting, but he did. It was a great meeting. He saw there was good value. He started buying some of it, and the stock price went from $4 to $8 like overnight. And so the CEO was like, "Oh, Mary, we have to have you in house. I want you to come and work for me, doing corporate communications, public relations, and investor relations for my $10 million laser systems company."
Wow.
And so we made that happen. So I did that for about two plus years, and I lived on Long Island and learned how to talk funny. And again, just was in Manhattan a lot, doing the face to face meetings was my strength, but really it was just the follow up and the getting on the phone and just really making things happen. So more storytelling, but in this case it was one story told again to different audiences as opposed to
Right.
Nowadays, that's the same with the PR, same with hacking salt. There's a variety of different ways that we tell that story through different platforms, and that's what keeps it fresh and keeps it alive to me.
When did you meet Chris?
Met him in 1999 online, Love at AOL, which was the precursor to Match.com. He said he was looking for the girl next door. I literally lived 3 miles from, I was at 101 at 7, and he was at
Okay, so
7 in Christmas
now
Lake
you
Road.
were in Minneapolis.
Yes. Oh,
Okay.
so 2 years plus in New York. My sister lives here in Minneapolis, and she kept talking about this great quality of life,
Oh,
all the
yes.
arts, all the everything. So I started interviewing with PR Newswire, which was like kind of the best of. There wasn't a true PR agency, something I could do well with the wire releases. And so I crashed on her couch for, excuse me, for a few months. That turned into a couple of years, and you know, got upgraded to a bedroom. And as I said, met Chris in '99. Married in 2000, house here in Maple Grove that I'm sitting in right now in '01, baby in '02, and started Sterling Cross in '03.
Get it
So
done.
we were ready.
Okay.
Hmm.
So, started to Sterling Cross. What was Chris's background?
He got paid to play with toys. He started,
Nice. A
he,
professional little boy.
the, he was the biggest boy. Yeah, exactly. Walt Disney was his hero. He had a scholarship to play football up in Seattle, was a couple credits away from graduating. Just the money ran out, so he jumped in his car and drove all the way down to Florida and got a job at Star Wars The Ride and started just in the retail store and then worked his way up to the marketing department. For Disney, he became a trainer, and then he went around the world and trained people to open up Disney stores for retail. And so he did that for many years. And then Toys R Us grabbed him, and he lived in New Jersey, and he helped open the flagship store with the big Ferris wheel and everything like that in Manhattan. And the irony is that when I lived in downtown Chicago, he some of the same years lived out in the suburbs of Chicago working for different companies. When I lived on Long Island, he was out in New Jersey. So we were just made to meet each other. It was just ironic that we had to go through the internet to find each other. His last job after Toys R Us is he became Build-A-Bear. And he was the chief bear because he was the first employee to open up the store in the Ridgedale area. And when he got the title of chief bear, I said, well, I can't just be the president of Sterling Cross. I have to be the chief storyteller. And so we started playing around with the idea of just having some fun with the titles of what you do and how you do it and just, not taking yourself too seriously. When we got married, I always knew I wanted to start my own company. I was
Hmm.
scared, but I had a lot of entrepreneurial friends that were very encouraging. Chris continued working for the first year or so, just to keep the benefits as I was building the
Sure.
company and things like that. And then when, as he said, he gets paid to play with toys, and the newest toy coming up was Twitter and social platforms and things like that. So then I was to be the business writer and the media pitcher, and he was going to bring up a social media arm of the company as well. And when he would go out and do trainings all around the country, he would be working in mall based hours. And so he would have to be somewhere for 90 days, hand off the keys, see you at the corporate, part, the end of the year. But he got really bored in his hotel room. So he started taking jobs in the hospitality world. So he became a DJ and a bouncer and a bartender and, all these things just to keep himself sane. So therefore, as we were building our clientele, Chris did a wonderful job presenting, and he could talk the language, and he knew the things that restaurant managers and owners were looking for. And so that was a very early and strong niche that, I would get the chefs on TV, and he would teach the chefs or whomever how to tweet and be responsive and how to let this channel be a marketing tool for you, a sales tool for you, and not just something that people are going to complain and then nothing ever gets said.
That's amazing. I mean, to think at that period of time when social media was so new,
Hmm.
and people, I remember the first time I heard about Twitter, I could not grab onto what it actually was. So he was
Right.
at the very beginning of that, and you two had complementary skills,
Right.
you traditional,
Yeah.
and him in
Emerging.
the
Yeah.
new
Exactly.
world.
Right. It was so much fun because he was just the love of my life. And we sat chair to chair, like in the little office. And I just could not get enough of working with him. And it was just, everyone's like, oh, working with your husband, that's got to be a drag. And it's like, oh, we do our best not to talk about work all day long. And, then our twins came along in '08. So, we've got three little kids running around, and, we're sitting there trying to elevate and grow the company, but yet still have that priority of staying digital or virtual, because we both worked at the big agencies downtown that had fancy foosball tables and things like that, and we didn't need that. We
Mhm.
wanted to be able to volunteer at the school, and we wanted to be able to take the kids to soccer practice and all of that. So we found a way to make that work, I think, pretty well.
In the next segment, we'll talk more about Chris's background and journey, and we'll talk about the role salt plays in our lives and bodies and the origin of the Hacking Salt website. This episode is brought to you by Bonicelli Cooking Club, home of the Mindful Mediterranean program. If you're looking for simple seasonal recipes, practical cooking strategies, and a more joyful way to approach food, you will find it here. Visit BonicelliCookingClub.com to learn more. Salt makes things taste better. It enhances flavor. That's why we love it. And the difference between salt and sodium is interesting because sodium is an element in salt, which is sodium chloride, but they aren't the same thing. Sodium is in kind of everything. So the terms are used interchangeably, but they're not the same thing. I'm correct in that, right?
That's absolutely right. And that's why with Chris, the way that he would cook and how he would hack the salt out is, outside of not having a salt shaker on the table, it's understanding if you choose mozzarella cheese versus cheddar cheese, you're going to get naturally occurring much higher levels in something like a sharp cheddar. So having the education and understanding that your body does need about 400 milligrams, daily. And I know 1,500 is what a lot of people in the low sodium world shoot for, but
Mhm.
the average person should be shooting for between 2,300, 2,500 or so. And that's maybe with a little bit of table salt as well, just to season the flavor on top.
So, in looking at that, given that salt is in everything, did he consider how much salt is in a carrot? Was he that calculated about it? Or did he just kind of look at what he was putting on top of things and adding to it?
Yes, just bigger picture things of just understanding, kind of like as I said, with this type of a meat is going to have naturally occurring this versus this. A lot of the frozen chicken is brined, and so that's sitting there in salt. You think chicken's the healthiest thing out there, but did you know maybe a good piece of steak might be actually healthier, a little more salt free? So it was again just educating, reading labels, and just really he was not a formally trained chef, or he didn't take a class at all. He had a passion. He was the term foodie is kind of thrown around a lot, but
Mhm.
he was really good at making up recipes. He grew up a lot. He was born in Minneapolis area. He grew up in California, and so some of his best friends were Filipino and Spanish, and so his mom would make homemade torts and tortillas, and they had all these ethnic foods growing up. And so he always had the hot sauce around. He always liked things a little bit different than the bland Minnesota palate, which was exciting to me because I grew up in Iowa, but then Chicago has a great food scene. And when I went out to New York, I took a intro to like a gourmet cooking class. So suddenly I realized like what hummus was and what tabbouleh was, and just all of these other things, and how fresh herbs really enhance things in a really significant way.
Well, most research shows that in the American diet, one of the biggest culprits is highly processed food.
That's
It
right.
doesn't sound like that was something that Chris ever participated in any way. It sounds like he was really into good food from the start. So, how did he start
Yes.
having health problems?
He caught a virus on an airplane. I'm not going to, it doesn't have to go that cellular, but the virus affected the liquids around his heart, or the fluids around his heart, and it infected his heart. And the heart grew 3 sizes too big, and that's not a good, healthy vessel. So he went into cardiomyopathy, and he had to be treated with a pacemaker, and then we went with an ICD shock box that was implanted, and we thought these gradual things were okay, but then he caught a second infection. His gallbladder got infected and reinfected the heart, and that put him into end stage heart failure in his 30s. And we had little kids at home. We had a thriving business that wasn't really going to, be acceptable. So they said, well, there's this thing called an LVAD, a left ventricular assist device, which is a pump that they graft onto your heart, and then you have a little fanny pack with battery powered computer that keeps your heart regulated and pumping while you're waiting for a heart transplant. So in 2011, he had his LVAD implanted. He could no longer then, swim or take showers or things like that. I had to do a nightly bandage change to keep everything, sterile and everything. And, we just adapted to a new way of living, and that was fine. And then he got his first heart transplant in 2013, and then he recovered really well. Came home after, just a few weeks, and the kids loved it because daddy got his energy back and he could play hide and seek again, and it was a whole new day. And so for many years, we had, the company was growing. He was starting to travel because he was a wonderful speaker, and he wrote a book about Foursquare and gamification of social media and everything like that. But what he found out is, after his first heart transplant, he was sharing a room in the hospital at the U of M, where we have had all of our work done, his work done. There was a truck driver that drank Coca-Cola and triple cheeseburgers. That was his diet. And he went to order his dinner one night, and they said, "Oh, well, you're on a low sodium diet." And so he said, "Okay, well, can I get this?" And they're like, "No, that doesn't, that's too much calcium or sodium. Can I get this?" Long story short, as
Mm-hmm.
you'd expect, he couldn't get anything but oatmeal. It was like, because he didn't know how to hack the salt. And so he literally just started to cry. And he's like, "I'm never going to be able to eat anything good again, ever." He's just like a 50-year-old truck driver man. And Chris kind of like, separated the curtain. He's like, "Okay, let's look at this menu again." He said, "Now, if we take this rice bowl and we take out the bun and we put in rice or whatever it is," he started showing him the tricks of the trade. And he said, if we take out these certain elements of these different things that are available to us, we can definitely stay on the low sodium path. And he was just like, "How do you know this?" And he's like, "It's just it just came so naturally to him, for him." And he had had a couple of years of looking at low sodium. As soon as he got the LVAD, he'd lost a ton of weight, and he was really doing all the research.
So at
But we
that
didn't
point,
feel like
he wasn't participating in low sodium completely at that point.
he was, as
He
as soon
was
as he got the
okay.
LVAD, he
So
was
he
low.
he was
He and
truly
our
an
family,
expert. Yeah. So the
yeah,
guy got lucky.
yeah, yeah. And Chris advocated with the U of M to see if they could have either a nutritionist on site that actually knew all the ins and outs of these specialty diets, or just come up with separate menus and things like that. But that's a whole different story as well. So what we found is, I was going to all of the support groups for the LVAD and for the heart transplant and everything like that. And I was, we were again in our 30s, and um, all the people that were in the support groups and all the people going through these hard things were retirees. And so
Hmm.
they were just growing old, and their heart was growing old with them. And so the fact that Chris had this virus, and he was a thriving, business owner and father and husband and everything, we couldn't find people that looked like us that could relate to, how can we juggle this and do this. And what we did is, well, Chris was always on Twitter because, again, he had to know what was coming and going and build the relationships, and
That's how
because we were
we
selling
met
it
on
to our
Twitter, isn't
clients.
it?
Yeah, exactly. So we found our first two people out, in one in New Jersey and one in Texas, a woman and a man about our age that also were going through low sodium and the heart things and the LVAD things and the transplant things. And then we finally said, okay, there is a community out there. How do we harvest this? How do we put things together so that we can all support each other? So we started doing things like tweet ups on Tuesday nights, and we tried to invite the broader community. But then, in the end, Chris said, "Well, he's a talented writer," so he said, "Let's create a blog." So in 2015, he launched Hacking Salt, and so he
And
took
the name
recipes.
and the name hacking salt, is that something he came up with because he used it as a term all the time?
Mhm.
Okay. Okay.
It was truly. that was just his personality. He's just, he's just gonna just get the little ice pick out and hack away at the salt, and it's going to be delicious. It's going to be tasty and fresh, but it's going to be something he can eat
Hmm.
because it's a passion of his. So we started with the blog, and he would be at home doing recipes in the house, but he'd also just find recipes that we might have been making or out of the Betty Crocker, and then just say, okay, substitute this instead of this. And again, he didn't have necessarily a team behind him. This was just him
Him at
exploring
home.
and doing these things.
It's so interesting that the medical community can identify these problems. And I run into the same thing with my mindful Mediterranean diet, where somebody is told, eat the Mediterranean diet.
Right,
And the first step is, well, what is it?
right,
And the second step is, how on earth do you do it when it's such a far step away from what we ordinarily do? And you might get a sheet of paper with some instructions, but when it gets right down to it, we want good tasting food, like your guy wanted his cheeseburger and his milkshake or whatever it is what that he would get when he was on the road. And frankly, if you're traveling like that, there is nothing else. I mean, you'd have to pack your own food to be able to live that way.
yeah, that's right.
So we just aren't living in a society that is conducive to it, and the medical community has a gap of, yes, we can tell you what to do, but we can't really tell you how to do it and make it taste good.
Exactly. Exactly. And when we looked also out on in the blog world, there was the largest influencer was a gal but went by the handle Sodium Girl, and she was
Mm-hmm.
just focused on recipes. And then there was this guy out in New Jersey, out in Long Island, who was his blog was called Shaking the Salt. So kind of the same thing, getting away from it. And he wanted that to be more of a community, so he had like tell the funny joke of the day or what's the meme or whatever. Whereas Chris wanted to create this blog that, like, the first tab is like, let's go through your pantry, let's figure out what comes, what stays, and let's really get down to the heart of it. Let's go through definitions, let's do this. Now here's a recipe section, and we can search and find what you want. But just as you had mentioned, a big section, and one of his most popular sections, is can I eat low sodium at? And he went to
Mm-hmm.
the biggest national chains, so Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, McDonald's, all the fast food, but also like the steakhouses, and the bigger chains that he knew that the blog is out on the interweb. So it's we weren't just talking to Minnesotan friends. So he definitely made sure that he would talked about things, and even some of the chains that we didn't even have access to, but he was a very good researcher, so he'd
Mm-hmm.
know how to go deep into the websites and say, okay, well, you can have a small fry without the salt, but you can substitute this, this, and this. And so he would find different opportunities within all these different restaurants on how to go out, and you can still go out and eat low sodium. You don't have to always pack something. So
So the blog website started in what year?
2015.
2015, and there was a book. When did that come about? Or there is a
20
book. We can still get
There's a
it, right?
cookbook.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yep. That was an interesting situation because 2017, in January 6th of that year, Chris caught a fever. And that's not good when you're in immunocompromised, way with after the first transplant. And so we went back to U of M, and they said, well, you'd gotten E. coli and it woke up your immune system, and it's looking at that heart that's not the original model, and your heart is going into rejection. So that was not good at all. So they put him on life support, which you're supposed to be on for 24, 48 hours. He was on for 8, 9 days, and we had to make considerations. Are we going to do a left and a right LVAD? Are we just going to do a right VAD and a left VAD? Are we going to just wait for a second heart transplant? Are we had to measure everything. And by the blessings of the good Lord and the strength of my Christopher, he pulled through, and he got healthier, and we were ready for him to come home and wait for that second heart transplant, but there was one drug he couldn't, that was, necessary for pumping his heart. So little things like that, would say, okay, we'll wait and stay in the hospital. And then with all of the other effects, everything is so related. And so because the heart was compromised, suddenly his kidneys were starting to have some problems. So then he had to like go into this world of dialysis and all these other things. And so then they said, well, I think you need a kidney transplant, which I would think, okay, so you're going to take out the old, but they're apparently, well, and again, I digress, but they were going to give him a third kidney, kind of like a little supercharger to keep things,
A
for the
third kid.
things that
I've
he
never
had.
heard of that before. Okay.
I said, U of M,
A,
I think I'm
a,
going to just
a
trust you.
booster kidney.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay.
But therefore, we were going to need to really, really cross fingers that the transplant, the person that was with the heart also had a good kidney so that it could be from the same donor. And it took 11 months, 12 months. But, after the first month or so, when Chris was weak and still in, recovery, he regained everything, and we just had to work from. I just would, get the kids ready, get them off to school, and then I would go to the hospital and work Sterling Cross with him during the day, get home in time for dinner, and started again the whole next day. So he was healthy and he was thriving. He was writing blogs. He was, sending me recipes, and I was photographing them, and so I could storytell again through that way. And as I said, he has such a great voice, and he would always tell such great stories in the blogs. So that was always going to be exact 100% what This is his blog, but again, he makes it so interesting and relatable. So I guess to finish the story, December 2017, we get the call for the new heart and kidney, and success. We had on the 14th, we had the double transplant, and but then I'm very sad to say we had some complications, and on December 20th, Chris passed away. So then it was, just everything stopped, and
It's
I
so
guess the
wonderful that he has a legacy in the work that he created, of course, in his family, but
Mhm.
to have a cookbook out there and this still surviving hacking salt site is so fantastic, and that must
Thank you.
feel really good to you to feel that you can carry on that legacy.
And I carry it on, and thank you. And I get compliments, and I get little side notes from people. Chris has been gone 8 years now, and I still to date get notes of people that are just finding the site or just finding the
Of
Facebook
course.
community, and they're saying, "You don't understand how this has been a lifesaver for me," or "I can now go to Thanksgiving and find alternatives, or bring my own, or I can go out and make things for my family that they actually like." Or one of our challenges was to create Thanksgiving dinner completely low sodium, the full 9 yards, the full meal, and we did that. And then when the twins were very little, we cheated because it was just too much work for everything. And we went to one of the local grocery stores, and we loved that we could buy Thanksgiving in a box. But what was important is that they timed it out. They're like, okay, start this recipe at this point, cook this. I mean, they had not only like, here's the ingredient list, but it's also, this is what you start when, and this is, how you do it. So we
Which
copied
is where
that, and
people
it's
usually get screwed up on holidays is the timing.
right.
Yeah, all the sides are
So
done and getting soggy, and the turkey's still in the
I,
oven, and then
yeah.
right.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So that's kind of I still my favorite and most popular blog, and I try to make sure that I get that repinned or promoted early, because we did it and we served our family, and we didn't tell them it was low sodium, and not a single person could tell.
That's wonderful. This episode is brought to you by Bonicelli Cooking Club, home of the Mindful Mediterranean program. If you're looking for simple seasonal recipes, practical cooking strategies, and a more joyful way to approach food, you will find it here. Visit BonicelliCookingClub.com to learn more. So, Mary, does low
Yes.
salt mean no flavor?
Absolutely not. There are so many ways. to enhance, kick up, and actually just bring to life the foods that we eat every day. When Chris was in the hospital for a year, the cafeteria food was just horrendous, but
Hmm.
he had figured out how to order basically a brunch. And he would have his eggs and he would have hot sauces that I would bring to him. And so he found different ways to make eggs interesting because that was one of the few things they couldn't screw up. So he, you know, put it with a rice or put it with a torte or put it with, whatever. But there was, definitely ways that you can pack the salt out and still make it interesting and make it a whole new, adventure, eating adventure.
So you've got your salsas, you've got dried herbs, fresh herbs,
Right.
combinations of
That's exactly right.
dried
That's exactly
herbs.
right. Uh-huh.
Okay. And did he concentrate on profiles such as uh, spice combinations that are Mexican or Spanish or Italian, or did he kind of go by cuisine, or did he just kind of
Hey,
put it together
personal
the way
preference.
personal
Yep.
preference? Okay.
Hmm.
Well, that brings me to another question. In terms of cuisines, are there any that are higher in sodium, lower in sodium? I mean, or is everyone kind of equal?
I think that's a great question. And as I'm not the hacker as well as Chris was, I'm going to switch it around a little bit to answer it in a different way. In that fresh produce versus the processed food is a huge difference because
Hmm.
you have a red bell pepper. What you see is what you get, as opposed to getting something like some processed meat, out of the deli section. You don't know what you're going to get, and you don't know if it's been brined, and you don't know how it's been preserved, and you don't know, the true salt content because they just don't record that as efficiently
Well, I'm
as they
making your
can.
own spice blends too. I mean, because you buy a pre-made taco mix, which I
Yes,
haven't done in years, and it's going to be absolutely action-packed, full of
right,
sodium, because
right.
that's what makes people excited about the food is that high sodium level, and
Yeah.
that's what we're all used to, frankly.
Hmm.
So, but if you make your own
Well,
blend at home,
that's right.
and you focus your profile more on maybe you just go for heat or you go
Right.
for combinations of peppers to get a more depth of flavor and that umami coming on.
That's right.
Yeah, you know.
Chris did do that. He made a sodium teriyaki sauce. He made ketchup low sodium. He made a taco seasoning low sodium. But that wasn't as much of his strength. And so what he also saw out there is that there was this uh, couple with a husband that had a heart issue, and the wife was a nurse, and they started their own spice rub because they found it out of necessity. So it's
Hmm.
DAX, DAKS, which is their first initials and things. And we just started, they sent sample packs to Chris. He loved them all. They sent him a pumpkin one during the seasonal, time, and then we collaborated. So if you put in the promo code, hacking salt is how you found out about them, then we actually got a little tiny kickback. But more importantly, it got out to our whole audience.
Right.
And in his heyday, we were on Pinterest and Instagram and Twitter and Facebook page, Facebook community. We even had a newsletter. But more importantly, this was right there in the center top page of the blog. So having things like that are again, this is the Mexican, this is the red, this is the smoky. All these flavors are already out there. You don't have to invent them yourselves. It's important to just be in community and get tips from other people.
So that's a big part of the site is recommending resources for people so they that are vetted. That's an important thing, not just randomly recommending things, but vetted resources
That's
for
right.
people. Okay, so that's very credible.
Right.
Is there a particular time of year where all of this is easier?
I think back again what we were saying with fresh versus processed,
Yes.
or winter versus a peak summer. Going down to the farmers market and just really understanding this was picked hours ago, and it couldn't get any fresher in most cases. And most importantly, it's helping a small farmer, and it's not processed. So I would say, and then on a personal level, I do potted rosemary and basil and mint and a few things out in our front, during the summer months. Um, but not as much, during the Minnesota winters. So,
Hmm.
you can still go to your local, grocery store and buy, some basil or something. But I would have to say that the warmer months in general are you have a little bit a higher variety.
Now, as you were going through all of this with Chris and his hospitalization and challenges and him eating a low sodium diet by by design, really. After a while, I think it became his mission. How did that affect your family? I mean, how did it affect how you and your children were eating, living with somebody that was doing that?
The food was delicious, and so the kids, they grew up knowing, how to eat. And you know what, if they wanted to have the Heinz ketchup, straight out of the fridge or out of, the grocery store, they could still use certain things, and Chris would have his other elements that he could, season with. But he would just never have the salt shaker on the dinner table.
I think that's so perfect because I find I have a grandson that had an egg allergy that he just outgrew, but he also has peanuts and tree nuts, which he won't outgrow.
Yeah.
But I have found in cooking for him and watching him eat
Hmm.
that even those things are big challenges, especially for a child. You discover so much about food and so much about, for example, eggs are really not as necessary. They're beautiful and I love them, but not as necessary as we think they are to make a cake or to make cookies or to make muffins or in anything that you take away makes you more aware of
Right.
everything else that is there.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a different way to cook. And again, we met when we were in our mid 30s, and so we had a lot of, years on our own cooking for ourselves, living in different parts of the country and traveling abroad, and just being exposed to so many things. So we had a number of good years where we could just eat whatever we'd want. And I loved it because when it was his turn or when he offered to make dinner, it was, you knew it was going to be delicious. It was more than just, in my family, my dad, his only thing he could make was like toast and cereal, and he would grill burgers, and that was it. Woohoo! Good job, Vince. But Chris was like, "Oh, I'm going to introduce you to some Cuban coffee and some very fancy French toast or something." And it's like, let's bring it on. This is a lot of fun. So um, to make these things low sodium, it was a change, but again, with the different seasonings that were just normal in our house, it became easier. And once you get rid of the things that are culprits, it's much easier.
You know, you just answered my next question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What is the biggest misconception about a low sodium diet?
That it's boring, that it's limited. I mean, yeah, there are certain things that will just have to eat in moderation, or just with your mindful Mediterranean. It's like you don't say no to cookies 100%, but yet you have two instead of 10. Um, So the misconception is that it's bland, and it doesn't have to be bland at all. Again, back to having marinades and having, one of the things that was part of our turkey marinade was just to take some ground stone mustard and some apricot jam and make that the glaze. And I use that year round. And it's the funniest thing is that because it was just the two ingredients that was top of mind, I didn't realize until I reread the recipe that he put scallion and broth and things like that in it. And it was like a whole different, like a rediscovery of this, to marinate your turkey in. But it's delicious on ham, and it's delicious on other meats, and it's so simple. And you probably have those two ingredients, in the fridge because it's not hard. So
Well, on that note, I want to circle back to the cookbook.
okay,
When did that come about? How did it come about? And just tell us a little bit about the process.
absolutely. Chris had grown a reputation again because he had so many social channels that he was so active on, and because it's a really good blog, and people would have word of mouth, and a lot of people would follow both communities. Because if you wanted a more serious, more food focused blog, you'd go to Hacking Salt, and if you wanted XYZ, there's a few other options out there. So with the cookbook, we were approached by a cookbook company, and they said, slow cooking and low sodium are the two hottest topics right now. What would you think about writing a cookbook with us, and then we would pay you to hack the salt out of recipes or contribute recipes or whatever it would take. But obviously, you're our marketing engine. People are already liking what you're saying and following what you're doing. So it's just it's a great collaboration. So, unfortunately, they approached him in late 2016, and we started to get contracts and started to get things in motion. And then he had the heart rejection. So, he ended up doing the hacking of these recipes that they ended up providing, or that he would give guidance to. I'd like to see if we could do a yogurt something something, or I'd like to see if we could do some desserts that focus on this area. And so they had a professional recipe writer produce these recipes. It was a bummer because he couldn't go into the kitchen and do it like he
Because
had
he
done
was
with.
in the hospital.
Yes, and he could not leave the hospital room. I mean, grounds. He had to have this IV on with him, 24/7.
Hmm.
So, but it was a testimony that you can in fact just understand how low sodium works, and from your bed, side, make the recipes delicious, and that's constantly, people compliment the recipes, and they've made them things year over year, year after year. And you can just go on Amazon, you can go on the Hacking Salt web blog site, and it's just a link away, and you can get the digital version. You can get it's less than $20, so it's not, and it's kind of a soft cover. I wish I would have had one handy here, but beautiful photography, beautiful everything. And that also was like a great lesson for us and being entrepreneurial. So he had started to write out the recipe outline for a second cookbook that we were going to produce and self-publish, with like rubs and barbecue and things like that. And then,
Hmm.
as importantly, just out of his own passion and personal experience, he was going to do a third cookbook, cooking with kids, low sodium. And he didn't get as far in that recipe or in the outline, but that was the plan. I'm trying to update the blog site because it's been around for a number of years now. So that's on my 2026 goals, is to take a look at, can I eat low sodium at Taco Bell? And because, these things were looked up at 2015 and maybe 2017, he was starting to go back and update some of them while he was, spending time in the hospital. But now I want to look at, I have analytics on the back end so I can see what are the most popular blogs, and let's do get a little refresh, and let's do, promote, that, here are new resources, or here's some new links to Amazon, that, kind of a store of some of the main things that, you want to buy, and go from there. So I've also invited a few low sodium collaborators that are longtime fans and friends of the family, I guess. It's interesting because you find you get so invested because you're on the site every day. And just last week, I saw a really smart gal who was talking about low sodium egg bites. And I said, "Oh my goodness! I mean, that sounds amazing." And so she's putting together her recipe. She said, "Well, the one that I'm posting today is actually someone else's. We'd have to get permission." So she said, "Let me go ahead and also like hack it a little bit and make it my own. So then I will then do a little write up for you." And so I've got the people in mind, and I've approached them over the last couple of years, and there's interest. But I think it's time to breathe a little more life into Hacking Salt, and so all I can say is stay tuned.
Okay, and where can we find Hacking Salt?
HackingSalt.com.
That's so simple.
It
Well,
is.
we will post all of the links to everything that we talked about, so they will
Thank you.
be easy to find. Mary, thank you so much for doing this interview with me and sharing
No,
everything that you have shared.
pleasure.
I will be watching the website and the Facebook group, hackingsalt.com.
Thank you, Laura.
Thanks, Mary.